Welcome back to Through the Woods 360, guys. We're in the holiday spirit here.
Yeah, we are. We are gearing up for Christmas. We already told you that. And today, we're going to bring you something else good and sweet to eat.
Absolutely. Apple pie is amazing at any time. But Thanksgiving and Christmas, apple pie is top notch. And Leslie's apple pie is the bomb.
And it makes the house smell so awesome. And we're going to do it quick because, like I said, I know you're in a hurry. Pressed for time.
Right.
Lots to do. Presents to wrap and everything else. So we're going to use the pre-made crust just like we did on the butternut squash pie with the apples in it. But we're going to add a little thing that'll take a little time, but you can make it up ahead of time. We're going to make a caramel sauce to go over the top of this apple pie. And I know you already saw the title, so we're going to have some pecans on there too. So we're going to have an apple caramel pecan pie. Oh, it's awesome. You're going to be amazed.
Stay tuned.
Okay, we're going to get ready to stir up the apple pie. I have in here, about 6 cups of apples. I'm a little short. Not worth the drive down the mountain for sure. So our pie won't be quite as full. You're probably going to want about 7 to 8 cups of apples. And they're already sliced up, about nickel thick like we had done them before. Seems like everything's nickel thick, right? In this bowl I have a cup of sugar. You can go 3/4 of a cup. You can cut it down to that much if you want, if you don't want that much sugar in it. And then we're going to add some cinnamon. And I always take my cinnamon and add it into my sugar because it mixes throughout the apples a lot easier. I only use a half a teaspoon of cinnamon because I don't like that much cinnamon in the apple pie. I mean, it should be just a little bit. If you are a huge cinnamon lover, by all means, add a teaspoon. Most recipes call for a teaspoon. And I just mix this up in here just like you would make cinnamon sugar for toast, but it would be very pale cinnamon sugar, but
It'd be sugar cinnamon.
and I have yeah, sugar cinnamon, but just enough because if I put the cinnamon straight in on top of the apples, a lot of times it'll just stick there. So I just give it a little toss, and then we're going to dump this in here. And over the top of that, I'm going to put in 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm going to dump it on the sugar. It seems to me like it just distributes better that way through the apples. That is all that goes in.
Oh, wow, the smell already.
This is all that goes in here. And we're going to toss these with the sugar that has the cinnamon and the vanilla in it. And then we're going to let them sit and draw their juice just like we did when we made the butternut squash apple pie. So that's mixed up in there, and we're going to let that sit. We're going to get our crust over here, our pie plate over here, and I'm using a deep dish pie plate just like last time, and a pre-made crust. And we're going to do the same thing that we did last time. We are going to show you guys how to make homemade pie crust. It's just not during the holidays when everybody's so busy. You know, like come February when there's nothing to do, then you'll want to tackle making a homemade pie crust. And this we're just going to lay in here and center it just like we did before. So we'll get that done, and then we're going to make the topping for this pie. As a matter of fact, I can actually just set this aside and we'll get the topping mixed up, and I'll finish that here in a little bit. Just don't forget when you're doing it, make sure that you get all those air bubbles out of that crust, even after you crimp the edges up. Okay, so for our topping, could you grab me that, Gino?
Sure. There you go.
Okay. For our topping, we're going to make a pecan crunch topping, and I stacked everything in here together. So we've got, hold on one second. I might do that in this bigger bowl because they'd be able to see better. Let me grab my recipe so I make sure I tell you right what's in here. We have 5 tablespoons of butter, which is right here. It's not in there yet, but it will go in at last. 2/3 of a cup of packed brown sugar. So we'll dump that in there. I'm going to need a fork as well, Gino.
Okay.
We have a half a cup of flour.
There you go.
And I need the salt shaker.
Salt coming up.
We have 1 cup of chopped pecans. It was a cup, but some of them dumped over in here. So we're going to dump that in there.
There we go.
And a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So that's probably about what your cap on your salt shaker holds, plus 1 sprinkle. That's what I'm saying anyway. So this brown sugar is hard.
Let's see if I can move it.
Box brown sugar is really hard brown sugar. I might have to break that up with my hands. And it's cold in here. It's not, it's an old cabin and it's drafty, and we got down to, I don't know, we were in the teens overnight. It was like 22 this morning, I think.
At the bottom of the mountain, yeah.
So yeah, so it's pretty cold here.
Maybe around 16, 17 here this morning, I'm guessing.
So if you don't use box brown sugar and it's not super cold,
hey,
you don't have to do this with your fingers.
You know, if you see us in flannel and long sleeves, it's cold.
Yeah. But I'll take it, because I'll tell you what, you probably saw a little bit in the intro, that fire in there. Oh, feels good. Nothing like sitting down at night with some old time music on and all the lights out, a couple candles lit, and sitting by the fire.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think tonight we might string some popcorn and cranberries for the Christmas tree. So after you get this brown sugar and flour and nuts all mixed up, which that's about as good as it's going to get with this lumpy brown sugar, then we're going to cut some butter into this. That knife is right there. And you want your butter to be cold. You don't want it melted. Oops, sorry, Gino. You don't want it to be melted. This is the same way you would make a crumb topping with oatmeal. So you're just going to cut pieces of butter in here.
Cold butter.
Oh.
Cold butter, not an issue in here this morning.
I can't do that. I know the butter's too cold to cut it that way, but a lot of times
it's kind of like that bud fruitcake you were talking about. You can build a house with it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's starting to melt in my hands now. But if you cut them into 4s and then you cut it up in here, you already got some little pieces to work with. And we're just going to work with this fork and kind of cut this into there. Got a rag over there?
I do.
Cut these out. Yeah, the butter is definitely not, room temperature is not soft butter. But you want to know what it's just like it is at home for me, so it's good.
I love this time of year.
All we're going to do is we're going to work this butter into this flour, brown sugar, and nuts. And we won't torch you and show you all of that when we. And then this is going to go on top of our apples. The only other step we have to do with the apples is after the apples draw all their juice, we're going to add some flour to it. How much flour depends on how much juice your apples draw. And I'll get into that when we add the flour to it. Okay, so our apples have drawn their juice. Gino, get a shot in here. You can see how much juice is in there and see that it doesn't look like sugar anymore. So I have a 1/4 cup of flour in here. I don't know if it's going to take all of this or a little more, a little less. So we're going to dump some of this in here, about half. And I'm going to mix that up in here. And my apples, you can see that there are a lot of small pieces of apples in here because these apples were needing to have something done to them. And like we said, waste not, want not. So the perfect thing to do as far as I'm concerned is make apple bread or an apple pie, but to bake them. So I'm mixing this flour up in here, and then we're going to take a look at the juice itself. And I don't know how else to explain this. Everybody I tell, my sister, my daughter, you just want the juice to look a little floury. You know, you don't want it to be, it was clear to begin with. And that still, Gino, get a shot of that. That still isn't quite enough flour, just by how it looks. And I'm going to dump the rest of that in there. And it's not so important that you even mix the flour onto the apples. It just has to be in the juice. So when you read an apple pie recipe, they'll tell you how many tablespoons of flour or how many cups of flour. You can't go by that because every apple is different and every apple has a different amount of juice in it. And until you quit listening to what they tell you and do it by how it looks, you'll never have a good apple pie. Okay, you see that in there? That's about how you want it to look. So we're going to take this and we're going to dump this in our pie shell. And it's really easy. Now, if we were going to make a double crusted pie, it would be not in a deep dish pie shell. It's hard to do in a deep dish pie shell to seal the crust on it. But we're just going to take these and push these around. And I know that looks like lots of apples, but when we get this out of the oven, it's going to have way less apples in it because they're going to cook down. So when you would do this, you would want about another 1.5 cups to 2 cups of apples, and it would be pretty high. But see, we're going to push it down in there. You can see our juice. And this is our topping, our crumb topping. See that? And we're just going to take this and we're going to put this all over the top of this pie. And then this is going to bake. And after it cools, we're going to take our caramel sauce that has also slightly cooled. And we're going to put the caramel on top. I can say it. Sinuses are getting to me. On top of this topping, this pecan topping, and it's gonna be delectable. How's that? It's gonna be it is. It's gonna be incredible.
I will vouch for that fact.
The flavors just go so well together, and it's kind of like you get the caramel and the apple and the pecans. And that's kind of like caramel apples, you know? I mean, good caramel apples. Cheap ones use peanuts. So you can see I'm trying to make sure that I get all of the apples covered and all of this topping on here. Because this is where it's at. Get these couple that I dropped. Okay, and it's going to go into a 350-degree oven. And we'll check on it later and we'll let you know about how long it takes to bake this one. And if you do a deep dish about the same size, it'll be a good guideline. Now I'm in this electric oven, but hopefully the fruitcake baked good, so we'll hope this does too. Our pie is out of the oven, but you're not going to get to see it yet. We're going to make the caramel sauce for it. Pie has got to cool, and then we'll put the caramel sauce over the top of it. So for the caramel sauce, use a stick of butter, which is a 1/2 cup. I guess we better turn this on since it's so slow, since it's electric.
Slow to heat up and slow to cool down.
Oh, I'll take the heating up over the cooling down. And our butter's a little softer. I had this on the stove after we took the pie out, so we didn't have to wait as long as we did yesterday. So to that, let me throw this away. To that, we're going to add a cup of packed brown sugar. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do the same thing with the butter and the brown sugar. I'm going to wait for that to melt a little bit that we did yesterday. Let me grab my whisk.
Well, I'm not sure what order these are going to air, so they may not see yesterday's until next week or the week after.
He is right. He is right. I think we might put this apple pie on first, but you'll want to stay tuned for the butter rum sauce. So we're going to melt this butter in here, and then we're going to put our brown sugar in. Now, the other day, when we made the rum butter sauce, let's put it that way, we used sugar in the raw sugar, turbinado sugar. They are the same. You can use them equal ratios. 1 cup of one for 1 cup of the other. It doesn't matter either way. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to use brown sugar for this one. Okay, so to our melted butter, we're going to add 1 cup of packed brown sugar. And I'm going to take it out like this because if I dump it in, it might kind of plop in there and splash my butter. We don't want that to happen. And this brown sugar is really hard and packed. So I'm going to get that down in there. And I'm going to turn this down just a little bit until we get this. We don't want it cooking until after we get the butter and the brown sugar all incorporated together. And we'll show you what that looks like when we get to that point. Okay, so we've got the sugar and the butter incorporated. See how it's not separated out? Now what I did when I was getting that going is I used this rubber silicone scraper to make sure that I got everything, because the whisk doesn't get all the way down here at the bottom of your pot. And if you watched our apple pecan cobblestone coffee cake, this is real similar, except for that it had a little bit more butter in it.
Hope to that. There you go.
Now, this is a real simple recipe. We have here a third of a cup of cream, heavy cream, and we're going to add a little of this in at a time. We don't want to dump it all in because we need to get the fat in the cream to blend with the fat in the butter and to have it not separate out. So I'm going to dump a little bit in at a time, and we don't want to cool this down too much either. And this cream was cold, so we'll do it in about 3. And I'm just whisking this together. And when you're getting your sugar melted into your butter, you need to make sure that you keep stirring it. You don't want that butter, the brown sugar, to start to caramelize and turn candy-like. So keep her moving. Now we're going to dump the rest of this in here, and I'm going to use this to scrape it out because that cream is thick and kind of hangs to it. And we want all that creamy goodness. Oh. I don't want to leave any of it in there.
The goodness.
We're all about the goodness. Hey, if it doesn't taste good, why make it?
Exactly.
So we're going to get this all mixed together. The only other thing that goes in here is vanilla. And if you've been paying attention and watching, you already know vanilla goes in at the end because we don't want to cook it off. So we're going to get this all stirred together, and then we're going to cook it until it's getting kind of thick. And you don't want to let it go too long or you're going to have caramels. And we don't want caramels, we want caramel sauce. Or caramel sauce, depending on how you talk. In our neck of the woods, it's always been caramel.
This is true.
And yes, I do know it's spelled caramel, but can't teach an old dog new tricks. Oh, it already looks like it, doesn't it? Look.
Yeah, sure does.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
Let me suck up there where they can get a gander at how that comes off that whisk.
We're going to turn this up just a little bit so we can get a little heat to it now that we've got all of our sugar and butter and cream incorporated. It's all one.
Yeah.
No separation. And every now and again I will take that and go around the edges because your whisk doesn't reach there. And
I was zoomed in. They didn't see what you pointed to. It was the spatula.
Yeah.
Just got her. It looks really, really good.
It does look good. But see, it's still really thin. It's just, we're not doing anything yet. But once we get a little heat here, and we get a little cooking going on, now if we had gas, we'd already be doing it.
You'd be cooking with gas.
Mm-hmm. But it's all right.
Small trade-off for staying in a
Yes, sir.
in a beautiful original chinked cabin.
I love it here. If I could pick this up and move it to somewhere that was secluded, this would do me just fine.
Oh yeah, me too.
Big garden, fruit cellar.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
if it was in the mountains and you had a stream, you could even make yourself like a what do you call it? Spring house, where you got the trench and the water runs through it and you
Right.
keep stuff
Keep
cold.
stuff cold. Yes, ma'am.
Keep stuff cold without
Absolutely.
refrigeration. those are good for making cheese, certain cheeses.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome
Yeah,
for
yeah.
that. Never made cheese, but I want to.
I think maybe we'll try it sometime.
I think so.
We'll try it, and if it works out, then maybe we'll do a video on it.
Mozzarella is supposed to be, I think, one of the easiest cheeses and quickest cheeses to make. So we might try that. I mean, who doesn't like mozzarella, you know? I guess if you don't like pizza. I like pizza. I'm going to set that there. And I'm going to let that cool a little bit. And I'm going to see what it's like. Just so I know about how much longer I've got to keep heat underneath this. But keep her moving. Always keep her moving. It's still thin. See?
Yep.
But it's starting to taste good. Not caramel yet. Still has that brown sugar and butter flavor. Okay, we are starting to actually get some heat here now with this turtle stove. And you can tell because it's getting way thinner. See how much thinner it is now? Because we're putting heat to it, but it's gonna get thicker. And we're just trying not to stir for a second. I don't know, Gino, just look in here real quick. You can see that it's changing. You can see that it doesn't look like it did a while ago. See, and then see around the edges.
Even the color is
see around the edges. It's starting to cook.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to do. We need to cook this. But every now and again, we need to make sure that we get our edges as well. And I probably could just go to stirring it with this now. You don't, I mean, not necessarily constantly, but just about constantly. Because boy, if you burn it.
Sure, yeah, I was going to say, you sure don't want it to burn.
No. You're not going to hurt it by stirring it constantly, but I'll tell you what, you'll really mess it up if it's not stirred when it needs to be stirred. Yeah, now this thing's finally getting hot.
That's funny because when you said turtle stove, the first thing that entered my mind was the caramel inside of a turtle.
That's funny, yeah.
A chocolate turtle.
I've made homemade caramels before, and I made some turtles to go with it when I did them. Oh, it's amazing. Homemade caramels are just unbelievable, and I've got two different recipes, one for a softer caramel and one for a harder caramel, but oh my god, I love the soft ones. They're amazing. I always say amazing.
We should, you know what, we should make some candy sometime.
We should.
I remember at least once when we were kids, Mom made hard candy.
That was after we had gone to...
Mom and Dad made hard candy in a cookie sheet.
Mom and Dad and all of us kids. We had gone to New Salem, to Lincoln's New Salem.
Right.
And they got that book, and we made candy from the recipe in the book. That was neat. It was right around Christmas, too, because we put red food coloring and green food coloring in it.
I think we went up there for Christmas at New Salem, if I'm not mistaken.
That was neat years ago. I don't know if they still do it the same way
They
as
do
it
not.
was.
I looked on their website. They do not.
That's really a bummer.
But you used to have the horse-drawn ride through the village and the hot mulled cider.
Hot mulled cider in the Rutledge Tavern.
Yep. It was a neat place.
Neat. And they used to have people in the cabins.
Oh yeah, I'm going to zoom in there. We're bubbling now. We're really doing some cooking.
We are. They portrayed cabin life, and there was some old ladies that were playing the hammered dulcimers, and
it was.
One lady was spinning some wool, and
it was a really
neat.
Cool event. I wish they still did it.
It was really neat.
Still a very cool place to visit.
We used to go up there at least once a year when we were kids, and sometimes twice, sometimes in the summer, and then go back for Christmas at New Salem, and it was awesome. Yeah,
it's definitely cooking up now.
Yeah, and see how it's bubbling, how you can just see the bubbles keep rolling in. Once you get to this point, you probably only want to cook it about another 3 minutes. I know there's probably a certain temperature that you're supposed to do it at, but it's just the way I was taught. And then you get a spoon, or honestly, I like how the whisk works, and see how it runs off of it. See if it's getting thick, let it set aside, and let it set up on it, and cool a little bit, and then you can tell. Because when this gets cool, that's when it's going to get thick. Now, when you're actually making candy, when you're making caramels, you've got to cook it to a certain temperature, because that determines how hard or how soft your caramels are going to be. So I'm going to let that sit there, and we'll check that in a minute. It looks like it might still be a little thin, honestly.
It sure is starting to smell really, really good.
We're getting good flavor. And it's not real sticky yet. We might just let this go just about a minute longer, I think. I don't want to get it too thick. We'll have caramels instead. So let's just watch the time. We'll let it go for about a minute. And any recipe, I'm sure newer recipes will give you time, but any recipe back from when I started cooking would just say cook until thickened. And that's kind of deceiving, because when you're cooking it, it's molten. You know, it's not gonna be thick. It's gonna be thin until it cools. If you cook this until it's thick, you're gonna be in trouble.
Right.
It's not gonna be caramel sauce.
Like, if you did that with sausage gravy, you'd end up cutting it with a knife and serving it with a pie server on your biscuit, right?
Yeah. Let's do this off of here instead. I'll be able to tell, because it'll stay on there instead of the whisk.
There's a little piece on there.
Okay, it's been a minute, so maybe I'll leave that set, and we'll just move this a second so it doesn't keep cooking. Can you see that?
Yeah, yep. Oh, yeah, that's starting to look pretty good. Now we got to let it cool before we add the vanilla, right?
We got to let it cool just a minute. We're going to stir it so it cools off faster.
Let me move this whole
No, I'm going to go to the back burner. You're fine.
Oh, I thought you were going to go to this front one here. I was going to give you some room with this tripod.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll just go right here.
Okay.
Let me move this so they can see when I add the vanilla.
That works.
So remember when I told you that a cap of vanilla is a teaspoon? This is our cap off of our cheap vanilla. I'm sorry I can't do this in front of you, but so there's your teaspoon of vanilla. And that's what goes in here, is a teaspoon of vanilla. And we'll rinse that cap off later. And you just stir that in there. And then this is all you do. We're going to let this cool. And when it's cool, we'll be back with you, and it's going to go over the top of
oh, yeah, they're going to get to see the pie.
apple pecan pie, and then we're going to have apple caramel pecan pie. There is our caramel sauce. Picture perfect. And we're going to use this whisk, and we're going to drizzle this all over. You can use a spoon, but I think it works easier to use a whisk. Sometimes you end up dumping a whole spoonful on it. And you can, if you want, you can get all fancy with it and just make it like crisscross and everything. But in my family, nobody cares about being fancy. They just want caramel and pecans.
We don't care what it looks like. We care what it tastes like.
Well, I mean, it should always look pretty, but we're going to
yeah, I wasn't going there, but you know what I was saying.
And this is not ice cold. This is not in the fridge, but it's room temperature. We walked outside and let it cool off because we're quite cool outside. Oh my God, and it's just amazing. So, you guys got to try to make this pie. It's time for the moment of truth. And I don't have a pie server here, so I'd imagine there's probably not a lot of people that stay here that bake pies, so.
Or even really cook.
So I'm going to do my best to try to get it out of here with the knife, so we might end up having a wreck, but I guarantee you one thing, it will still taste the same. Yep, we're going to have a wreck. Maybe we'll try with a fork. Yep, we had a wreck. Sorry, Gino.
Hey, it's okay. It's going to taste the same.
No pie server. Alrighty. Come on over here and try that, Gino.
Oh, man. Incredible. Merry Christmas to me. This is unbelievable. You got to try this one. Thanks for watching, guys. Merry Christmas. God bless y'all.